Hello everyone, welcome back to the Vinyl Brotherhood, where we like to kick back, take it easy, and just chat about music, whether it be the latest and greatest new releases or old favorites from years gone by. It's been quite a while, but She and Him have finally released a new album, and this time it's a covers album of old songs by the Beach Boys' very own Brian Wilson. It's going to be a really interesting time, so we're going to get settled, get comfortable, and we'll start here momentarily. Hello there. I've been waiting for Volume 4 by She and Him for a long while now. It's been something like 9 years, and it doesn't seem like the band is in any hurry to work on it, but if they aren't going to make an album of original material, then a cover record of Brian Wilson masterpieces is quite literally the next best thing. Let's quickly get everyone on the same page here. She and Him is a duo made up of actress Zooey Deschanel and singer-songwriter Em Ward. Zooey, who you may know from Elf, New Girl, 500 Days of Summer, and so on, does the grand majority of vocal duties and writes most of their original material. Matt Ward, a staple in the indie folk scene, seems to be the mind behind the production side of things, and let us not forget his affinity for lead guitar. They've come back together after a long hiatus to bring us a collection of new recordings, adapting their favorite tunes written by the one and only Brian Wilson, the legendary songwriter, singer, pianist, bassist, producer, and all-around visionary of the Beach Boys, one of America's and the world's most cherished and influential music groups. Brian's mark on the music world cannot be underestimated, and if you're a fan of She and Him, it should be no surprise to you that this covers album has come about. They've already got a small handful of Beach Boys covers, including God Only Knows, Little Saint Nick, and more. They were even featured on a song on Brian's 2015 album, No Peer Pressure. It's going to be interesting to see what She and Him can do with these sunny California staples. After all, Brian's got some pretty big shoes to fill. Now, onwards to the record player.
Well, it's been building up inside of me for I don't know how long. I don't know why, but I keep thinking something's bound to go wrong. But she loves
Melt Away, a tribute to Brian Wilson. The cover is fittingly retro, some nice vector artwork. Got the track listing on the back with a little write-up on some of the background. If I'm being very nitpicky, but if I were them, I would have maybe tied the artwork to maybe some old Beach Boys artwork a little bit, like with the fonts, but maybe we're a little tired of the Cooper Black from Pet Sounds. I don't remember this was a pre-order thing, but there are different variants of the vinyl, and mine is Fanta Orange, and I'm pretty excited about that. It's pretty cool. And here's another pre-order thing. Screen printed album sleeve, numbered 211 out of 250. So pretty excited about that as well. Let's dive into this, shall we? A minute ago, I said that I wasn't terribly surprised to see that She and Him were making a Brian covers record. It's the why that I really can't wrap my mind around. They haven't put out a full-length project since 2016, so this is kind of a weird way to come back. And while Brian is definitely a big name within the music world, he's not exactly a common household name, especially as we get farther and farther away from the Beach Boys' 60s heyday. I'll put it this way, I've rarely ever brought up Brian Wilson to friends, acquaintances, and coworkers without having to first explain who he is. So I see this as being something of a passion project from She and Him, given that its draw is probably fairly limited. I personally was thrilled to see the news, as Brian is my all-time favorite songwriter, and I'm also no stranger to She and Him. I admire how they lovingly bring a mid-century sensibility to everything they do, and their dedication to tried and true classic recording techniques and processes, and their devotion to melody and harmony has made them one of my go-to indie pop acts over the years. So how do they do? How do they handle the enormous task of reinterpreting and recreating some of the most revered pop numbers of the last century? Well, I'd like to begin by giving them mad props for their very not obvious song selection. There's a surprisingly fun balance between the early 60s surf and summer hits and the more esoteric art pop of the late 60s and 70s. As a diehard, I was elated to see songs from Sunflower, Friends, and Surf's Up represented in the track listing. On a more confusing note, however, the sequence of these 14 tracks is something of a head scratcher. For example, Wouldn't It Be Nice, one of the most joyful and blissful songs in the rock and roll canon, is immediately followed by Till I Die, Brian's dark and somber masterpiece from 1971. As I was listening to this album, there were multiple times when I felt that these songs weren't really leading into each other very well. It's not an uncommon hurdle when you're pulling from a large and varied body of work, but I think some more thought could have been given so that the album as a whole might not feel so disjointed. Darlin' from the Wild Honey record takes the coveted spot of first song on the album. It was mildly amusing to hear M. Ward deliver the first verse of the song rather than Zoe. When she shows up for the second verse along with the rhythm section, the song gains the momentum it needs. All in all, it's a pretty faithful rendition to the original, and nothing on the album sounds purely copy and paste, which is favorable, but when they do deviate, the results tend to be fairly hit and miss. I'm not at all opposed to infusing some original touches or being a little adventurous with the arrangement, and some songs sound like they were made to be covered by Matt and Zoe. Melt Away from Brian's 1988 solo project suits the duo very well. Zoe sounds very comfortable with the vocals here, and the tempo, dynamics, and even the bittersweet melancholy of the song are a great fit for these two. It wouldn't sound out of place on one of their non-Brian Wilson dedicated records. And the album ends with a very nice and appropriately relaxing version of Meant for You. I think they knocked this one out of the park, and the tail end of the track presents a really good opportunity for Matt to add some personal touches with his guitar. The one nitpick I have is with the second verse. Zoe sings it first, and then Matt follows it with the exact same lyrics. The 1968 version from Friends only includes that one verse, but actually there is a second verse of this, the longer version of the song, that's out there somewhere. I first heard it on the Made in California box set. I'm not holding it against She and Him at all, but it would have been a really, really nice touch. A few other songs that I would categorize as wins would be Kiss Me Baby, Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, and Till I Die. While they don't veer too far from the originals as far as the composition goes, they find ways of making these versions their own, and the passion and respect for these songs are very apparent. They treat Don't Talk with the necessary tenderness, and Till I Die with the gravitas of the original. The arrangements are feeling fresh, the performances are committed, and I'm happy to say I was able to reap some of that Beach Boys magic from these fine renditions. Heads You Win, Tails I Lose, an oldie from the Surf and Safari album, is a most surprising inclusion, being the deep, deep cut that it is. It's not a Beach Boys song I revisit often, but She and Him's version actually gave me a new appreciation for it. It's largely instrumental, which I found to be a puzzling choice as Zoe seems to flourish with the more upbeat tempo, and I've loved her take on Mike Love's distinct vocal delivery in the past. But this time around, M. Ward handles the melody with a vibrant, surfy lead guitar. It made this catchy tune shine for me in ways that the original hadn't. Another nice surprise is a guest lead vocal by the man himself, Brian Wilson, on Do It Again. If you keep up with Brian and the Beach Boys, then you know that killer vocal leads from Brian are becoming fewer and farther between to our dismay. He shows up in a big way, and he's sounding pretty good, which goes to show that he can be amazing under a competent producer and miles away from one Joe Thomas. Unfortunately, the rest of the track feels somewhat limp and half-hearted, missing the heart and the energy of the 1969 original. This seems like a good time to bring up a couple of other songs, namely Don't Worry Baby and Please Let Me Wonder, two Cold Stone classics I have the utmost respect and admiration for. The She and Him covers of these two songs, along with Do It Again, brought a certain issue to my attention. If you listen to the originals, you might notice how prevalent Brian's trademark bass guitar playing is. Compare that to She and Him, where the bass and really the rest of the band are a little farther down in the mix. You need those root notes to ground the complex array of harmonies, lest they're just floating in the ether, missing musical context. I made a similar criticism about a different album recently because it's really important to the mixing process. I generally liked their iterations of Don't Worry Baby and Please Let Me Wonder, even if I feel like there were some missed opportunities from Zoe's background vocals at times. I don't doubt for a second that she could have handled the Beach Boys' interweaving harmony stack in the verse of Don't Worry Baby, but she opted to adapt the much simpler guitar part into a vocal part. The song needs that part for sure, but I can't help but see it as something of a cop-out. There is a similar critique that I have for their covers of Good to My Baby and Deirdre, which, as a side note, I'm surprised to see here since, as far as I know, Deirdre was mostly penned by fellow Beach Boy Bruce Johnston, with minimal involvement from Brian. They tweaked the melodies here and there, particularly in the verses, possibly to fit their indie folk mold a little better, or maybe to feel more in step with the adjustments to the tempo, which, in my opinion, was detrimental for Deirdre. The altered melodies are simplified, not as rich, and lacking some of the beauty that the originals have in their complexity. It can't be an easy thing to out-melody Brian Wilson, so if you're gonna try, you'll wanna bring your A game, and in She and Him's case, I'm not sure this is it. This Whole World, and Wouldn't It Be Nice, add in some extra musical passages that are kind of just there and lack conviction, if you will. Maybe they lack a feeling of intentionality. They don't really add value and don't do much to elevate the compositions. I'm not resistant to change or have trouble disassociating from the originals. There are some amazing Brian Wilson covers out there that I love, but change isn't a good thing just because it's change. Art can be subjective within an objective framework. When you're stripping something of its beauty and watering it down, or polluting it and adding confusion, you've got something that's objectively worse. Change isn't a pro or a con in and of itself. It's what you change and how you change it. Some of the creative choices on Melt Away were really cool, and others came across as unnecessary and misguided. I think the most important thing when covering a tune is that the spirit of the original is preserved. Heads I Win changed a lot, and I came away feeling like I just stepped out of a goofy 60s beach comedy. It was nicely repurposed, but the essence remained fully intact. And that's when I find tributes to be the most successful. It really becomes a tribute in that sense, you know what I mean? So ultimately, I find myself very indifferent towards Melt Away. I love the idea on paper, and Matt and Zoe are both plenty talented, but some uninspired performances rather, and creative decisions, they do too large a portion of a disservice to this project. I'd encourage you to listen to some of their older Beach Boys covers or their 2014 album titled Classics, where they pull from the Great American Songbook. Those recordings truly exemplify the importance of capturing the spirit of a great song. Cover albums can be tricky, eh? I think I've said enough, so let's take our album and head back to the couch, and I will close us out with some final thoughts. I love She and Him, and I love Brian Wilson, so believe me when I say that it brings me no joy to be this critical. For all of the reasons I stated prior, Melt Away ultimately did not come together for me, but that's not to say that it's not without its merits. While I didn't love every arrangement, we need to remember that every one of these songs were originally top-notch Beach Boys productions, and they all have an inherent touch of excellence to them. And obviously, everything we love about She and Him's sound is largely present as well. So that's another thing Melt Away's got going for it. We can delight in the cozy aesthetic, the warm production, and the classic techniques that Zoe and Matt always deliver so reliably, but alas, this is not the She and Him record that I will be revisiting on a regular basis. Once the novelty of reinterpreted Brian Wilson has worn off, it's hard to find much reason to be honest. I think I'll have to score Melt Away, a tribute to Brian Wilson, a 6 out of 10 today. Well then, I'm always keeping an eye on She and Him, so I guess we'll see them again soon for either a Volume 4 or a third Christmas album review, whichever comes first. Hopefully their time back together in the studio has sparked the necessary inspiration for something a little more consequential. We're gonna wrap it up here for today, folks. Remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, shout it from the rooftops, all that good stuff. It's been a blast hearing from all of you, so please don't be shy. Say hello in the comments down below. Oh, and come hang out with us over on Instagram as well. It's been nothing but good times over there, seeing everyone's record collections and whatnot. Again, thanks for watching. Y'all are the best. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time right here at the Vinyl Brotherhood.